Narration Plantation proudly presents Oliver's Oboe by Harold Andrews, narrated by Cy Fellows. In the small town of Blakely, in the county of Tulliver, lived a young, sprightly boy whose fine name was Oliver. His imagination would actively flow when he'd pick up and play his delightful oboe. When the sun was setting and out came the moon, he would carry his oboe to his second-floor room. As he started to play into the wee late-night hours, he discovered his oboe had magical powers. There in his room, as he began to play, he found himself traveling far, far away. It started quite simply with just a few notes. He looked up to find himself adrift in a boat. No matter what his musical style, where he arrived, he would stay for a while. The more notes that he'd play, the farther his travels would take him that day. Back in his home, when his family was able, they would gather together to hear his new fable. He would come excitedly down to greet his sister Mabel, and the rest of his family, who were sitting anxiously at the breakfast room table. "My journey was incredible," he began to explain, his excitement so visible it was hard to contain. "I've just returned from serenading wild mustangs on the far western plain." Now, Great Aunt Bethesda, who had never heard the stories before, said, "Oliver, this is wonderful. Please, tell me more." Oliver, not bashful in the least, was more than delighted to share his great feast. His face shone ever so brightly as he prepared to tell his adventures, which did occur nightly. "I've been to places that you just can't believe," as he sat at the table rolling up his shirt sleeves. "I've played in a balloon high above Niagara Falls, and traveled long distances to play in great halls. I've played in a boat in all 7 seas, and I played for the Queen as she drank her hot tea. Now, I know this sounds quite alarming, but I've been to the Far East and done some snake charming. I have sat in a tent in the broad Serengeti and been to Nepal and played for a Yeti. I've played for the Bushman as I sat in his hut and in front of the tomb of Egypt's King Tut. I've played in a boat upon King George's moat, and high in the Alps for some marvelous goats. At the OK Corral, I have played at high noon, and in a rocketing spaceship as I flew to the moon. In the belly of a whale I have played, I confess, and at midnight on the rails of the Orient Express." Now, Great Aunt Bethesda, listening so intensely, said, "With all of these adventures, when do you go to bed?" Oliver, so intense was his gaze, kept telling his adventures that he knew would amaze. Performing for the Emperor of China was only by chance, but not the famed Mexican sombrero dance. The North Pole I've performed where it's really quite snowy, and in the outback for a 3-month-old Joey. A jig I did play for the town of Petoskey, and at a car show in the oldest jalopy. I've played the valleys and the peaks of the vast Rocky Mountains, and the old world towns with their beautiful fountains. While riding an elephant, the oboe I've blown, and beside an unfinished Michelangelo stone. I have been to great cities, like Paris and Rome, and to distant shores with waves of white foam. Lullabies have I played on the banks of the Nile to a gathering of huge, sleepy crocodiles. I have played to keep towns from pillage and plunder, and in the scariest of storms with its lightning and thunder. On horseback I've played during a game of polo, and on the Appalachian Trail I have played my solo. And last but not least, as I played for a feast, I stopped a charging wild Mongolian beast. As they all sat at breakfast, as the sun quickly rose, they all quietly contemplated Oliver's prose. Great-aunt Bethesda, as she buttered her toast, said, "Oliver, with all the places you've been in your far-distant travels, which is the place that you treasure the most?" Oliver thought of all the places he'd been, and how he'd travelled many a mile. The more that he thought, the bigger his smile. He looked at Mabel, Great-aunt Bethesda, and the rest at the table. "Do you really want to know my favourite place, where I happily play a tune?" They all nodded yes, as they sat on the edge of their chairs thinking he might say the moon. "Why, it's right up those stairs in my second-floor room." The end.